Ladies and germs, you know you're in for a treat when you hear that tune, because it's time for another week of the Rec Poker Podcast. That's right. You heard it correct, folks. I've got the best freaking job in the world. I get to hang out here with my friends every Monday night and talk about poker. My name is Jim Reed. I'm Bluffsterini in the home game and at Rec Poker Jim on Twitter. And this is the Rec Poker Podcast Forums Edition. We're going to be taking a hand from our forums and talking about it here on the air. And our forums, like much of what we do here at Rec Poker, is free. We are a largely volunteer-based organization, so I have to thank our sponsors, the fantastic folks over at the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino, just north of the Twin Cities in Columbus, Minnesota. Thank you, Running Aces, for your support. Thank you to all our premium members for their $15 a month. It helps us out a lot. And thanks to the Wrecking Crew members here on the Forums Edition. We talk with various Wrecking Crew members. It's a different group every week. And if you want to find out more about the fantastic people that make everything happen here at Rec Poker, you can go to rec.poker/crew, or you can just listen up because you're going to meet two quality Wrecking Crew members right about now.
I'm Chris Jones. You can find me 5B5 on Twitter or 5x5 in the Poker Stars home game.
I'm Rob Washam, and you can find me Rabman50 just about everywhere.
These are two of the OGs of Rec Poker. These guys have been here longer than I have, but they still let me host the podcast on Monday because they're just that kind of nice guys. Thanks, fellas. So here we are. We are going to be looking at, it's Monday night, so we're playing in the nightly home game, the nightly play money, free to play, but with real prizes home game, played through the PokerStars client. Join for free. Head on over to rec.poker/home game to find out more details about that. And as we're doing it, we're going to take a hand from the Rec Poker forums. This is one from Black Spruce. Black Spruce has posted before, and we've been chatting on Twitter from time to time. They're really enjoying some live events, and they've been getting better by posting in the forums, which is a great way to kind of share your uncertainty, because you need to share your uncertainty in order to get better as a player. You need to talk about things you don't already know the answers about. And this is a great example here. Black Spruce has entitled this post, Final Table Flub. And you can tell just from the beginning of the post that they feel like they misplayed a spot here. And I think we'll get some interesting analysis from our panel. So Black Spruce starts the post. In an online $21 PKO tournament last night with 388 entries, I got down to the final five. I'm not going to spoil it, but he says he had second place locked up, but threw it away by making a move that maybe he shouldn't have made. And we're going to talk about the details here in a second. So to set the scene, five-handed, playing down from 388. So already, congratulations to Black Spruce for making it to the final table. That's an accomplishment into itself, into a tournament with that many players. And now you just really want to get into that top three, top two money and try and have a really, really positive result here. Five-handed, the chip leader has 7.4 million chips, about 37 big blinds. The hero, Black Spruce, is in second place with 4.7 million chips, about 23 big blinds. The third place stack has about 1.7 or 8.5 big blinds, 1.7 million chips, that's 8.5 big blinds. And there's two small stacks, each with about 4 big blinds. So two short stacks with 4 big blinds, 8.5 in the middle. Our hero has 23 and the chip leader has 37. So yes, there is a sense from an ICM point of view that we really do have a lot of equity in this tournament. And part of our game strategy should be to allow some of these shorter stacks to bust out, to let us ladder up without putting our own chips at risk. So here is what Black Spruce has to say. It says, I don't remember the exact payouts, but first and second place paid the same, around $700. Then something like third $550, fourth $400, fifth $250. He had a bounty on his own head of about $130. The chip leader had a bounty of about $260, and the short stacks were all were about $70, $60, and $5. So the players that Black Spruce covers have a bounty of $70, $60, and $5. And notice that first and second get paid the same. The reason that is because when first place takes out second place at the end of the tournament, they win their bounty. And so effectively, the bounty of the second place player becomes the difference in the prize pool payout between first and second place. So Black Spruce says, with 3 short stacks, I was essentially guaranteed to lock up at least second place. I don't know if that may be strong language to say essentially guaranteed to lock up second, but you definitely don't, there's no reason for you to go out 5th or even 4th necessarily. I think that's fair to say. And maybe collect a bounty along the way. So with the bounties I'd already captured, I could pretty much fold my way to $900. And instead, he says, I shoved heads up against the chip leader, literally thinking as the hand began that was the one thing I should not do, to get heads up battle with the chip leader, and went out in 5th place for a total of 340. So we will kind of spoil it here. He shoved, he got called, he did not win the hand, and that was the end of his tournament life. So there's a couple of things that we're going to talk about tonight. Chris, you were the first person to respond to the post, so I'm going to throw to you to open the conversation here. But I think one of the things, just before we talk about the strategic element of it, is, Black Spruce, you're sitting there, you're even saying to yourself, as the hand begins, this is the one thing I shouldn't do. And I think it's very natural as we're playing in the moment to kind of have all these competing factors weighing on us and pulling us in different directions. But, having the one thing that you can't do is often something that you really have to kind of use as an anchor in these kind of situations. And sometimes there's a lot of different choices that are all kind of equally bad or good, but sometimes it's just like something that you have to avoid or something that you have to do. And I think you're right to be thinking about it in these terms. Chris, what was it about this post that got you interested in responding first?
Well, I think we can talk about the hand itself and the action in a little bit, but I think before we even get there, I think the first thing to notice is, I'm no PKO expert, but I think one of the things that we have to look at is there is a point often when you're reaching or at a final table where the pay jumps actually exceed most of the players' bounties that you're chasing. This is earlier in the tournament. Like if we're just in the money and the pay jumps are like going up little by little, there can be some bounty chasing that really makes a lot of sense for us. But there's only one significant bounty left. All the pay jumps that we're seeing, like just laddering up, are bigger than everyone's bounty except for the chip leader. And we can't win that unless something really shifts in the dynamic. So there's really, that even incentivizes us more to stay away from that chip leader. The only reason we want to get really involved with them is to, if we just are certain that we can just cripple them and flip the tables and start to go after their bounty. But as we'll talk about, I don't think that's a situation here. And then the second thing is, like, I think we're going to talk about this as a pretty, this is a pretty big mistake. This is a pretty catastrophic sort of error that's going to take place in this hand. But I want to commend Black Spruce for posting this, for wondering about it, for bringing it up, and for trying to learn from it. Sometimes if you make those kinds of mistakes, you might be tempted to sort of like not tell anyone, kind of hide it a little bit. Maybe you kind of move on, just like kind of ignore that it even happened. So the fact that he's even posting about this and trying to sort of learn from it. So I want to commend you for doing that. And we're going to talk about this as a mistake, but that's how we learn. That's how we get better. And that's just an important thing to acknowledge.
And like, we all make poker mistakes at the table. All of us do. And the pros do as well. Everyone makes poker mistakes at the table. But kudos to you for not compounding your mistake by then just, like Chris says, sweeping it under the rug or not learning from it. You're really taking control of your own poker journey here by taking these moments where we've made mistakes and sharing them with the world so that we can get better. It speaks to the confidence that you have in yourself as a player, your drive to improve, And I just think it's the sign of a winning player is that they are willing to share these mistakes with the world, so that they can improve in the areas that they need to improve. So, like Chris says, kudos to you, Black Spade. It just speaks to the ascent that you're on as a player here.
And so then let's talk about the hand specifically, because this is where I see a lot of players, and I think the theme of this is going to be not only is this an ICM. Let's take away actually the bounties and the ICM and all that sort of stuff, and let's just talk about this hand. And what I see a lot of recreational players get into a lot of trouble is on hands exactly like this. And it has to do with relative hand strength and this idea of full houses being just, like this kind of like, oh, I got a full house. Now I can get all the chips in the middle. And this is kind of not always the case. And so the hand that we have here, we are dealt pocket fives, a hand that should not get us into all this kinds of trouble too often, but occasionally it can. So, and our hero elects on the button to open a min open to 2 big blinds. The villain in this hand, which is the chip leader, is on the button, opens the 2 big blinds. It folds to us in the big blind. We have pocket fives and we call. Now I think that's fine. I think we've got, we're 23 big blinds here. We have to remember though, we cannot get a bounty. And if we do not see a 5, we're probably done with this hand. But the flop, so we go to a flop. The flop comes king 4-4. Our hero checks. The button bets really small. And our hero elects to make a call off the small bet. I don't even mind this call here. We occasionally, our villain's going to shut down. Pocket fives might be the best hand in this case. And occasionally we're going to bink a 5 on the turn. And we're paying a cheap price. We still have a commanding second place chip stack, even in this case. But where it all goes awry is on the turn. The turn comes the third 4. So the board is now 4-4, king 4. We have a quote unquote full house. But if we start thinking about this, we have probably the worst possible full house. And when our opponent bets on this turn, I'll describe the action and then let's talk about our opponent bets. They bet. We check to them. They bet 3.5 big blinds, and our hero elects to shove. And that's where I think we should maybe just talk about this. Like, what are we hoping to accomplish when they make that second turn bet? What do we think they are doing it with that we beat?
I mean, I think theoretically they could be doing it with some unpaired overcards like that aren't a king. They have a ton of those in their opening range. So if you're just thinking about their range opens a ton of those hands, makes the small flop C bet. And then the only question is, do they size up a bit on the turn because they really want you to fold? I don't think you can necessarily say that about every player in these player pools. So I think maybe they could be doing it with these like Jack. I mean, it would only be for fold equity, real essentially. Like there's no value part of their range for them doing it. But I mean, you're a dog to every pocket pair that they open and every King X hand that they had. And they have a lot of King X hands that they're opening so from the button. Like it's a ton, especially because it's not just the suited one, but it's the offsuits, which the combos of offsuit King X hands are like, it's a ton. It's a ton.
They probably have every suited king. I think they have King Deuce suited in this spot as a chip leader on the button.
Yes.
And I think they could be opening down to, if they're tight, they're opening down to King 10 off. And if they're loose, they're opening down to maybe every king. I don't know. 6. Yeah, whatever. So they have a ton of King X. They have aces, by the way. They have they just, I mean, they have it a lot here. They have it a lot.
And I know Rob's going to jump in here one sec, but like the thing I want to just drive home is that there's an argument for maybe just flat calling and then reevaluating on the river because it's such a small sizing. They might get, if they are bluffing, they might just chicken out on the river and then you can win a small pot. But by check raising in this way that you have, you really contort their continuing range to only ever include hands that are crushing you. And you can get some of those like unpaired overcards to fold by doing it, but I just don't think that makes up a big enough portion of their overall range that makes that a savvy play. Sorry, Rob, I cut off it.
That's okay. I think as a chip leader there, every king is in my raising range there. I mean, I'm raising almost my entire range, almost every hand, just because no one should be fighting against me without a real hand. So you can open really wide there. So maybe that's what our hero was thinking, is that button was opening very wide. The thing is that turn bet, to me, if I'm making a turn bet as a bluff in that spot, I'm betting more in the range of 6 to 6.5, maybe big blinds instead of, well, he bet less than half the pot. So I think that tells me that he's trying to string us along a little bit. Because if he had, if you're bluffing, you're going to want to try to get the guy off of the hand, not invite him to call at a cheap rate. So I don't know. I think our hero, like Chris said earlier, was thinking only the strength of his own hand without considering the types of hands that the button was doing this with. And I think a lot of people do that. I think I've done it. I don't know that anybody in this panel can say they haven't done this.
Right.
Because we all have, and it's so easy to do. But the question, that you need to ask yourself before you put your hand on the mouse, take your hand off the mouse, and before you put your hand on the mouse, say, what are they doing this with? Just ask yourself that question. What are they doing this with?
Take your hand off the mouse is great advice. When you're playing online, you've got a time bank. This is the time in the tournament. Don't make snap decisions. Use your time bank and get out of autopilot. Just get out of autopilot. Really consider every option every time, and think about what are the factors pulling you in different directions. And taking your hand off the mouse. It sounds silly, but it's a way to kind of make sure that you are grounded and that you're not making any autopilot decisions. I think that's a great tip.
And the other thing about this is they also have some fours, by the way. I mean, they have like ace 4, king 4. They've got probably 4-5 suited, maybe, some of those kind. Yeah. So they've got some quads. They've got some king. They've got a ton of king X. And none of those are going to fold to our shove ever in the history of the universe. So the only good thing, and all the stuff that we're just crushing, if they have like queen jack and they're doing this, right, those are folding, but we're beating those. I guess we're protecting ourselves a little. Maybe we're trying to get them to fold like 6s through 10s or some sort of like thing like that. Representing the king ourselves. But I just don't think there's enough of that, given how much king and 4x can be in their range, that I just don't think we're ever really accomplishing anything, and we're only just making them play optimally against us. And we just don't have to make this. We can still just get out of here. If we really don't believe them, if we think they're doing this with a ton of they're just being a big stack bully, then we can, like you said, just call. We still will be second in chips. If they shove the river on us, we're still going to be second in chips. So I like a fold first. I like a call second. And I think a shove is just kind of it's a disaster in this spot.
And let's just think about the other parts of their range and how they are going to play the river. Because I like this point, Chris. You can just check call. The best way to get money from a range like this of your opponent is to let them continue bluffing if they're going to. But think about this: if they do have pocket sixes, they're not betting the river after you call flop and turn. They want to get those sixes to showdown. And you have shown some strength by check calling both these streets on a very dry board. So you're kind of telling them you have some showdown value. I don't think they're going to value bet pocket sixes. And I don't think they're going to bluff queen jack unpaired either. I think they might. But again, those combos just make up such a small portion of the range that they're taking these actions with, because they're doing it with all their infinite number of king X combos, and plus those other pocket pairs, and it just feels like we're trying to affect a part of their range that we don't really need to affect in this way, and we're kind of instead making ourselves vulnerable to the part of their range that we don't want them to have, it just isn't something that we get to control. So I think we can check call this, still get to the river. It goes check, check. We win a lot when it goes check, check. If they bet the river, I think we can confidently fold, knowing that they don't have enough bluffs in their range there to balance out the number of value hands that they have that we're losing to with pocket fours. Let me ask you guys this. If we had pocket jacks instead, does that change? Let's say just hypothetically, we didn't 3-bet. It's the same situation. Does it is the hand rank at that point strong enough to warrant continuing more strongly? Chris, you're shaking your head, and I agree, because part of the problem is there's just all these king X hands in their range, and the overpairs, and the fours. So even if they do have, even if we do have a stronger absolute value hand, like you said at the very beginning, Chris, I think the relative hand, even with the hand strong as pocket jacks, is that right?
I think queens is a fold here for me. After the second bet goes in, I just don't, we're gonna get some. This is the thing. Also, if you read like some of the ICM materials, you read Dara Kearney's book, you're gonna get bluffed off these kinds of spots sometimes. You are in ICM jail. You're the second player here. You need to wait for these 4 big blind stacks to go away, and you're going to have better spots. And this isn't it.
Yeah, I think Rob has said this before, because he's been studying a lot of this ICM stuff in our book study over the last couple of years. Sometimes you're just in jail, and there's nothing you can do about it. Like you don't have an alternative to overfolding in spots like this, where you're the second biggest chip stack out of 5, and there's 2 baby 4 big blind stacks there. It's an uncomfortable position, but overfolding is the exploit. Like that's how you exploit this table, this dynamic. It's by injuring yourself as little as possible, because as Chris says, like you're in jail. It's okay to like wish you weren't in jail, but once you're in jail, you got to start playing like you're in jail, and there's just not a lot of wiggle room. It's just you just have to fold a lot.
And also, I mean, just one last point about this. The other thing is, like, we have hands in our range. We have a lot of king X in our range. We have more 4X in our range, by the way. So we have a ton of hands here that can comfortably call down. So it's not like we're folding too much here. It's not like we're folding like, well, if I can't fold here because I'm folding my entire range. It's not true. So like we're gonna have better hands to take a stand here and defend our blinds here.
Yeah, a couple things that come to mind. First of all, our hero, being the second stack, is actually under more ICM pressure than any of the other stacks at the table. The short stacks have almost the least amount of ICM pressure because they're destined to go out next. So they can be very aggressive. And when they are, even our hero has to look at only calling with hands like as strong as king, king, ace, ace when there's a move made by one of the smaller stacks, especially with the chip leader behind him. So the next question I have is, has the chip leader been bullying the table at this point in time? Do we know, is he opening really, really wide? I mean, he opened with ace king. I mean, that's a very strong open. Now he's on the button. He's got the chip lead. He could be opening really, really wide, but has he been doing that? Has he shown a pattern of just opening really wide with everything? Or is this all of a sudden he opens? Well, now you know that he's much stronger than just opening 100% of hands. So again, you have to look at what is the typical opening range of a button that is not trying to bully the table, and know that, well, that's much stronger than pocket fives.
Yeah. If you can imagine a stronger hand than pocket fives. I know Chris doesn't feel right.
It's hard to.
That way.
Well, you just gotta spike a 5 on the turn. That's the secret.
That's the secret. That is the best way to play pocket fives.
Yeah.
So I think the last thing I want to talk about is, I think we talk about like these competing factors a lot, and often you hear poker players talk about like, well, I'm just going to shove, and if he has it, he has it, and good game. Or, I'm going to shove, and, he's going to have to fold a lot of those hands that I'm beating, but it's a protection raise, and I'm just doing it. If I win the hand right now, that's a good outcome for me. Like, there's lots of these times where we might shove with a hand that we don't think is good, because getting the folds can be valuable. Or to like protect against overcards and that kind of stuff. It can be tricky to think about when that is the right time to do it and when there are other more important factors. But this is one of those times where the upside of winning a pot now, which is often really valuable, is just diminished greatly in comparison to the downside of losing your stack, particularly as Rob points out, because you have the second biggest stack here and there are these other sureties here. This just isn't one of those spots to like benefit from picking up a pot. This is one of those spots where you just don't bust the tournament. Yeah,
that's such a good point. If that's part of your, kind of the mindset in your game, you really need to be thinking about tournament stages, and ICM is something that you need to probably spend some time studying a little bit more, because that is going to trump those kinds of because there are times in the tournament where we're just going to put our stack in the when we have this kind of run out, maybe if this is an early part before the bubble, before, we're just in the accumulation stage. It's a king 4-4-4 board and I got pocket fives. I can see putting this shove in and just trying to clear out the equity, make sure that the jack tens of the world don't sort of get there. But the more and more this pressure builds on us, the more we just got to get that out of our game.
I think one of the hardest things about poker is choosing which of these factors to weigh more heavily at all these different points in the tournament against different opponents, like in the different variants that you're playing. So rarely is there clearly a right way to do it, especially when there's all these different multiple equilibriums that we can reach in the game. But I think Chris just nailed it. In the cases of high ICM, that is the factor that you should be weighing among all the others, because that can be a pretty expensive mistake that you make. Or, if you just get out of the hand, some other players might make some pretty expensive mistakes for them. And that's just printing for you to just not be the one making the mistakes. Just let other people make the mistakes.
Side note, did I tell you about my tournament a couple weeks ago where so I'm sitting there and I had two hands in a row. Just very quick story. I had pocket aces. And I had a decent stack. I'm at a final table. There's a big, it's 55,000 up top. And ace, I get ace queen goes all in. I call, I lose. Thanks a lot. It cripples me down to 4 big blinds. And the next hand, the very next hand, I am sitting there in the big blind. Under the gun opens. Button shoves. Small blind overshoves. I get the heck out of dodge, and under the gun calls. And it's aces versus kings versus queens, and double elimination, and I make $4,000 just sitting there.
Yep.
And that's why it's so valuable to sort of sit around and like you folding makes money in these spots, in these spots. And it's just, you don't need to get into these. You don't need to win the tournament right now. You just need to kind of be patient, People are going to make mistakes. Things are going to happen. Wait for the cards to come to you. Maybe you've got those pocket fives and maybe a 5 hits the flop. Now we can go. Now we can start, putting some chips in the middle. But here we just gotta wait for another spot. Yep.
Well, congrats on the score, Chris, but I know it burns every time you don't get first place. There's only the person who gets first place gets to walk away from the tournament feeling like they didn't lose. So congrats on a nice score, but I know it would have been nicer to go home with first place money there.
Oh yeah, it would have been nicer. But once you get that crippled thing, you're just expecting to, as Rob was mentioning, ICM's gone. I'm just expecting to be the next one out. And then this starts happening. I'm like, oh my God, I had an okay hand. I had a hand with 4 big blinds that I was like, okay, I guess this is the hand. I'm either going to make my stand or not. And then I was like, saw all this stuff happening. Like, okay, fold. I
love it. All right. Well, to Black Spruce, thank you for sharing this spot. I think it was a good opportunity for us to talk about competing factors, ICM implications, chip stacks, this kind of effect of getting into the spot of the final table. And so kudos to you for continuing to post in the forums and to get better as you bring these hands to us and to other fantastic poker folks out there. So thanks to Black Spruce. Thank you to Rob Washam. Thank you to Chris Jones. Of course, thank you to the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino. And of course, you, the listeners, and for you, the posters in the Rec Poker forums. Go drop some knowledge, and we'll see you again next week, folks.